Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, you lovely folks joining me over here at Marvel's Snap Zone. Welcome back for your weekly dose of tier list magic for hit card battler Marvel Snap. We are just 7 days away from global release, which is honestly very exciting. Very much looking forward to the game getting into the hands of thousands of new players and seeing what kind of evolves from the nature of that happening. This tier list is actually kind of great. A lot of changes heading into global release. Some of them mostly due to the fact that players clearly weren't done experimenting with patch 6.9. And then other ones down to the fact that literally just after we published the tier list last week, the nerf came in. And patch 7.9 hit, and of course Mr. Negative toned down in power once again. Alongside cards like Bishop and, possibly most importantly, Magic, seeing a change that will provoke one of the biggest shakeups in a Marvel Snap metagame that we have ever seen. As a result, Marvel Snap's currently a pretty open land, dozens of archetypes receiving a second chance, second shot at being competitive, with players allowed to express some creativity once again. Now, don't get us wrong, 1 week is not enough to grasp the full picture of how big this last patch has been, but we're already seeing some decks rise and others kind of struggle to keep up with the pack after just 1 week of play. For now, we don't see any one deck dominating the playing field. It's the first time in a long time that feels like it's been the case, and it seems like the gap from a deck's performance to another is much smaller compared to previous patches, which is just very exciting for the future of Marvel Snap. This is, technically speaking, our last tier list before global release, so the next time you see us, we'll be talking about the day one metagame of global Marvel Snap, which is very exciting, and we're looking forward to sharing our data heading into that as well. But until then, here is going to be our first tier list for patch 7.6, and hopefully it helps to give you some sense of the brand new metagame. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing the channel here at Marvel Snap Zone. We would like to be able to keep doing this for you as the game goes into global release, so let us know if you're enjoying the content, if it's beneficial to you, and also what else you want to see on the channel. Hit us up in the comment section down below. Secondly, we want to thank all the resources that we use to create this tier list. That's come from SnapFan, fantastic site providing analytical data about matchups and cube rates and stuff like that for games of Marvel Snap. Alongside that, their community Discord has been fantastic in helping us put this together, as has SnapDecks on Twitter. They've also been a fantastic resource for us as well. Shout out once again to marvelsnap.io, also a fantastic resource that's been helping our writers create this, as has many players being willing to offer their insight and given the time to chat in our own personal Discord too. If you want to join the Marvel Snap Zone Discord, link for that in the comment section down below as well. So plenty of data to amalgamate this week, and hopefully it will give you an idea of what things are looking like on that ladder. As always, if all you want is the list, it will be on the screen for you in just a second, or the article, the written version of this video, is available for you down in the description box as well. Give it a click, you can download and export all the decks directly from there if you'd like, and try them without having to listen to me waffle about how they play over the next 20 minutes. So, let us take a look at our tier list for this week. The king is dead. Long live the king. Negative Serotonin, finally, no longer a tier 1 deck this week, freeing up some space at the top for 3 tier 1 options, as we currently believe to be the case. That is the Sarah Miracle deck, unsurprisingly, a mainstay of a previous format, kind of holding its own and being the kind of safe go-to choice for a lot of folks. But it is joined this week by Zero, an archetype that really hasn't seen all that much success prior to a bunch of nerfs and buffs, so very excited to see it performing so very well, and Destroyer making its way up to a tier 1 choice this week, and I look forward to explaining to you why that is very shortly. Tier 2, very flush with many decks this week. The Patriot deck continues to be a mainstay, many different variants of that deck available to you as well. Sandwave Control, Lockjaw on reveal, decks that have been in the tier 2 bracket for a very long time and do not look to be shifting anywhere anytime soon. Negative Serotonin still has that reasonable power level and some surprise factor, finds itself in tier 2 this week. The Kazoo deck evolving and making some changes as well. New cards we can talk about in that one shortly, finding itself in tier 2 this week. Last but not least, One Going, very much the easy man's guide to Marvel Snap, finding itself in tier 2 this week as well. Tier 3, not quite as flush, but plenty of options. The Dracula discard deck, Death Pool and or the Death Wave variants finding themselves there as well. An interesting control shell finding itself in Tier 3 this week. Very much the remnants of the Magic Destroy deck that can no longer exist off the back of Magic's nerf. Kind of figuring out what the deck should look like moving forward. Tier 4 this week, hand size, traditional Mr. Negative, the movement deck, and the Hela Sandman archetype that is still being refined by the lovely guys over on Reddit. Alternatively, some budget choices still available for you at the bottom of the tier list if you're looking for things that do not contain quite as many Pool 3 cards. If you want to be able to download those and check them out, they will be available in the article in the description box below. So, my plan here moving forward, I'm going to break down all these Tier 1 decks for you. I'm going to show you some demonstrated demo deck lists, what they look like, the kind of cards you should be expecting to see, and give you an idea of how they play. And then moving a little further down the tier list, I'm going to go look for some of the things I think are the most exciting, some of the newer additions, maybe some of the biggest raisers or fallers over the course of the week, and talk about them in particular, so that if you want more details on all these decks, everything they have to do, sometimes dedicated written guides about how to play those archetypes, you can go click on the article and check it out for more information overall, and we can try and hopefully keep this a little more short form. So let's take a look at some of the biggest deals on this week's tier list. So, of course, unsurprisingly, the big cheese at the moment is Serra Miracle in 7.9. The deck has changed ever so slightly based on these nerfs. It doesn't get to quite utilize everything that it used to, but unsurprisingly the best deck that was not playing Magic or Mr. Negative before the nerf is logically atop the rankings after the nerf. With a lot of returning archetypes, it's obviously the perfect mix of a proven force and like a comfort pick for a lot of people, so it seems like the go-to deck for most players who just have no idea what it is they should be playing going forward. If you're not familiar with this archetype, as you may have guessed based on the name, it is looking to capitalise on the ability of Serra, arguably one of the most powerful cards left standing in Marvel Snap at the moment, to kind of create this spectacular turn 6 by dumping your entire hand onto the board as you know, out of nowhere as you possibly can. There are definitely cards in this deck that can be played before Serra, such as Bishop, which admittedly is now a little worse, courtesy of the nerf, but it's very flexible on turn 6. It means you can play these things early, or you can hold them late to spread your points as efficiently as possible, to surprise your opponent, and also gather information about what it is they're trying to do over the course of the game. It tends to make this deck a very, very strong pick that can earn a lot of cubes on the late turns of the game. It remains a tier 1 choice currently. We move on to the newest addition to Tier 1, and one of the most exciting decks in Marvel Snap right now, I think. Definitely the beneficiary of some of the nerfs and buffs, and just some unexplored play patterns over the last couple months. A rising archetype, and definitely one that's looking to develop a chunk of stats on the board. Zero fits the bill of decks that do well in the week after a patch. If you're unsure how to approach a certain matchup with this deck, the sheer amount of power it can develop is going to be able to let you play with a proactive mindset. You can, definitely kind of ignore your opponent sometimes if required. Otherwise, the deck is going to be able to have some counterplay as well. It gets to play cards like Enchantress against the ongoing decks, or a card like Carnage to help you clean up locations that get filled with rocks, or with goblins, or other general crap as the game continues. The deck is very much built around negating these negative abilities on cards like Typhoid Mary and Red Skull, so you only get their ridiculous rate on stats and none of their downsides. And it looks to abuse that by mixing it with several other synergies. The big one, this small Destroy package, you see in an awful lot of archetypes of Carnage, Venom, Bucky Barnes, these kinds of cards, and the ability to remove like negative impact from those big hitters with cards like Enchantress and Zero. The last card included, in order to get the biggest upside out of the rate you're playing, is Taskmaster, another 5-drop that's going to be able to duplicate the stats of Red Skull or Typhoid Mary on the last turn of the game. We do find some lists are playing Arnim Zola in this slot in order to split the stats into 2 places that it wasn't already, and that's also definitely an option if you choose to want to play it over something like Taskmaster. As a result, the deck plays very similarly to basically every other Destroy archetype until turn 4. You're going to be setting up cards to eat later on, like Nova, Bucky Barnes, Sabretooth, the Mysterio clones, and then when you're in your late game, you should be looking to play your big scorers, and look for play patterns that are going to let you maximise cubes while giving as little information as possible to your opponent. While Zero does need to be played before Typhoid Mary or Red Skull, Enchantress, Venom, and Taskmaster can come afterwards. which means that those can be played on turn 6 to surprise your opponent and take away a negative effect they believe is going to be staying in play. Very sweet deck, very cool to see it succeeding so much early this week. Love the Zero deck, hopefully it can stay on top or near the top of the tier list. The last tier 1 archetype for this week, a fan favourite, honestly, Destroyer. Been up and down our tier lists for as long as I can remember at this point, and it's really cool to see it kind of grasping hold of the top of the metagame. It's really hard to argue with the consistency of this deck since it became a more popular pick on the ladder. The deck's always been good, and has definitely been a comfort pick for some folks while they figured it out. But we feel like at the moment, at least, this deck's ceiling is very stuck in one place, and it's preying on a lot of the archetypes that are succeeding at the moment. But for now, this deck definitely feels worthy of being a tier 1 choice. Destroyer is one of the few decks in the game that will focus on 2 locations. You are very much looking to contest the third one sometimes, courtesy of things like Green Goblin or Hobgoblin to fill your opponent's side up, if you really need to, but you're looking to turn on Warpath. Warpath, a very powerful card that rewards you for playing to 2 locations, and this deck is very much built to do exactly that. We want to try and play armor on 1, and alongside some cards that we don't want to destroy on the last turn of the game. Warpath and the Demon from the hood are normally the highest point scorers that go alongside that we're looking to protect. On the other location, you want to be looking to play Bucky Barnes, Nova, the Goblin cards as a way to not only have Destroyer be the only card contributing to the stats on that location at the end of the game. If you can't find any of the things that you want to destroy, you can also use something like Cosmo in a deck like this to deny the Destroyer's effects and just have him be like a 16 statted card in the late game as well. And Cosmo, definitely a card you see in a variety of these lists in the flexible slots as well. Really cool to see this one picking up in popularity again. A mainstay of Marvel Snap at this point. Definitely worth trying out if you haven't already somehow. Very, very sweet deck. We're going to move on to take a look at Sandwave as the first deck I want to pay attention to in tier number 2 this week. Although its cube average is definitely quite low compared to the other decks in tier 2, I think it's worth pointing out that this deck is the only deck to crack the 60% win rate barrier in Snap fans' data this week. So it feels kind of criminal to rank it any lower than tier 2, even though you aren't really able to capitalize on chunks of cubes with the kind of gameplay patterns this deck has. Because if you play the Sandman or similar cards, your opponent is very likely to retreat if you ruin their entire game plan. So try and snap early with this deck if you can, rather than playing your key cards out early, and hopefully it should be a solid climbing option on the ladder for you. If you're not familiar with this deck, Sandwave has 2 very different play patterns it can tend to follow, either trying to deny the opponent their usual game plan, or abusing your big endgame cards with Wave's ability. If you go the Sandman route, you're going to want to focus on your deck's ability to play to multiple lanes at the same time, bypassing Sandman's limitations in the process through cards such as Claw, Doctor Doom, that let you put bodies on multiple locations at the same time. If you can spread it correctly, your opponent shouldn't be able to match the amount of points you're putting onto a lot of locations, which is very, very powerful. If you take the Wave route, you're going to be looking to wave into one of your big cards, preferably Odin, to trigger Wave again sometimes, and then play another 6-cost card the following turn. Or you can do the sequence of play Doctor Doom off of Wave on turn 4, and then wait to trigger Doctor Doom again on turn 6 to spam more Doom bots across locations. A sequence that works really, really well if you have a good play in the middle on turn 5. So very flexible mid-range style deck, very good against Serra and the late game decks trying to have big explosive turn 6s off the back of Sandman. Just a little hard to grab 8 cubes with this deck a lot of the time. So keep that in mind if you're looking to ladder up with it, but it is a consistent, powerful option you should be respecting on the Marvel Snap ladder. Next up, another deck that really kind of excites me in how it's starting to be innovated. We can look at Kazoo this week, firmly in tier 2. Kazoo kind of known to be one of the best budget choices when you're getting into the game early, to give you some options if you're looking to compete while you're waiting for some of the more interesting pool 3 cards to join your collection. It was already a really good deck in the last patch, but it benefits from being really simple to play, having a simple game plan against most opponents. But it's also evolving, and I think the fact that it's evolving and continuing to try new cards is very, very interesting for a deck that is otherwise seen as the entry point option. We've got some disruption in the list at this point, courtesy of cards like Debris and Green Goblin. Green Goblin, kind of just all-round powerful at this point. Definitely seeing play in a lot of these more mid-range decks, but Debris is a super interesting addition to the Kazoo archetype, clogging up your opponent's zones and giving you rocks that will be buffed by Kazaa or Blue Marvel, which I think is a fantastic inclusion to this archetype. The deck has definitely been a staple of Marvel Snap for months now and shouldn't surprise any opponents, but it is a fantastic starting point if you're looking for a deck to give you a firm grasp on the current environment of the game. It is a textbook proactive deck looking to make smart use of energy and play your cards when you can on curve as efficiently as you possibly can. The biggest emphasis when playing this deck should be around the cards required to build around them. So cards like Angela and dominating a location with it early, or Kazaa and Blue Marvel, your big endgame Anthem effects alongside Onslaught. This take is definitely looking to be slightly different than that sometimes due to disruptive elements that are tucked inside of it, because you want to be looking to limit what your opponent can do on certain locations as well. But most of the time you are just going to be looking to have your go-to curve of stuff into Kazaa, into Blue Marvel, into Onslaught, and have that be your powerful endgame play. Really sweet deck, and glad to see it thriving so much in the current environment. Last but not least, I want to take a time to talk about one of our Tier 3 options this week. Kind of the remnants of the Magic Destroy deck that is now looking to try and reform itself and figure out what it looks like now that Magic doesn't really fit the plan of the deck following the nerf. So it's still looking for its best list, for sure. And with Soundwave being a deck that was untouched, a lot of players who want to disrupt naturally flow towards that deck at the start of the season. But unsurprisingly, this kind of archetype is based on answering what the opponent does, so it's going to take more than a week to figure out, what the best cards are to counter the metagame, because we don't know what the metagame looks like just yet, truth be told. But for now, this deck is looking to use the traditional Odin shell, and then packing the rest of it out with disruptive tools alongside those powerful on-reveal effects. Most of the deck's gameplay is based around limiting the opponent's use of locations. You want to be using cards like Storm or Spider-Man or Debris to lock locations down, fill it with junk, stop them playing where they might want to play. Alongside this, you're going to be playing cards like Wave to disrupt the ability to play multiple cards on the final turns of the game, Dr. Octopus, tear your opponent's hand out, fill a location once it's full of stats to automatically win that location for you. Dr. Octopus really sweet with Daredevil too, really powerful 1-2 punch to provide you with some information before you tear your opponent's hand apart. And you can also just activate Mojo with Dr. Octopus to guarantee that the card is worth 8 stats on the location that it's on by filling it up for your opponent, which is just really cool. Very, very powerful, very sweet synergy. There's a lot of cards that are going to be tested in this build. Both Goblins, Scorpion, Captain Marvel, Professor X, cards like Claw, just to name a few that would fit in this disruptive multi-lane category. The Guardians of the Galaxy also potentially very powerful for something like this because they can be activated quite easily thanks to limiting where your opponent can play. But at the moment, the 12th card slot goes to Black Widow, forcing the opponent to waste another spot on a location they might not want to fill with the Widow's Bite, and that's currently what seems to be seeing play in that 12th card slot. But this deck is possibly the most exciting thing for Marvel Snap going forward because it's a bit of an unknown quantity. People are still figuring out what should be where, what cards they should be playing, and what the best anti-meta choices are, and I really look forward to seeing it evolve going forward. It's going to be very, very sweet. As always, folks, thanks for joining us for this video form of the tier list this week. Hopefully, this video has been of some benefit to you. One final time, if it has, and you want to see more of this, and you want to keep me here, consider subscribing to Marvel Snap Zone, or checking out the website, reading our articles, and supporting us over there. It lets us know that what we're doing is worth doing. Until next time, I've been HowlingMines, you've been amazing, and this has been Marvel Snap Zone. I'll see you at release.